The Central Intelligence Agency. Created in 1947 after World War II, the CIA was initially tasked with gathering foreign intelligence to prevent another global conflict. However, the agency's mandate quickly expanded, becoming deeply entangled in covert operations with devastating consequences for democracy and human rights worldwide. From Latin America to Afghanistan, the CIA's history is filled with interventions that left a trail of bloodshed and instability. Proponents argue these actions were necessary to combat communism, while critics contend they disregarded international law and harmed the U.S. reputation. This essay delves into the CIA's covert operations, examining its involvement in human rights abuses, the overthrow of governments, and the use of torture. By shedding light on these controversial chapters, we can understand their profound impact on U.S. foreign policy and global human rights perspectives. Nowhere is the dark side of the CIA's covert operations more evident than in Latin America. During the Cold War, the region became a battleground for ideological supremacy between the United States and the Soviet Union. The CIA, driven by the domino theory, engaged in a ruthless campaign to prevent the spread of communism in the Western Hemisphere. One of the most disturbing aspects was its support for death squads responsible for the torture, disappearance, and extrajudicial killing of tens of thousands of people. The CIA provided training, funding, and intelligence to these death squads, often turning a blind eye to their atrocities. Florencio Caballero, a former Honduran army interrogator, revealed he was trained by the CIA in interrogation techniques in Houston, Texas, in 1979. While the CIA explicitly prohibited physical torture, Caballero admitted they routinely hid detainees from their American handlers, subjected them to brutal torture, and handed them over to death squads. The 1953 Iranian coup d'état, which ousted Prime Minister Mohammad Mossadegh and installed the pro-Western Shah Mohammad Reza Pahlavi, exemplifies the CIA's willingness to subvert democracy. Mossadegh, who had nationalized the Iranian oil industry, was considered a threat to Western interests, leading the CIA to orchestrate a coup that plunged Iran into decades of authoritarian rule. Another example is the 1973 Chilean coup d'état. Following the election of Salvador Allende, a Marxist, as president of Chile, the CIA launched a covert operation to destabilize his government. The CIA provided financial and logistical support to opposition groups, instigated economic sabotage, and spread disinformation. On September 11, 1973, General Augusto Pinochet, backed by the CIA, led a bloody coup that overthrew Allende. Pinochet's dictatorship resulted in the deaths of thousands of Chileans and the torture and imprisonment of countless others. The CIA's legacy of covert operations and human rights abuses did not end with the Cold War. After the September 11, 2001 terrorist attacks, the CIA's role expanded dramatically as the United States launched its war on terror. Afghanistan, a safe haven for Osama bin Laden and al-Qaeda, became the primary target of U.S. military intervention. While the initial invasion was widely supported, the CIA's subsequent actions raised serious concerns about its commitment to human rights. A 2019 Human Rights Watch report accused the CIA of backing Afghan strike forces that committed serious abuses, including extrajudicial killings and enforced disappearances. These forces, often operating outside Afghan law, were given broad authority to target suspected insurgents, but their operations often resulted in civilian casualties. The report also highlighted the CIA's use of controversial drone strikes in Afghanistan. While drones are touted as precise weapons, human rights groups argued their use often lacks transparency and that the CIA's assessments of civilian casualties are unreliable. The CIA's activities in Afghanistan demonstrate its willingness to prioritize counterterrorism objectives over human rights concerns. In the wake of the 9/11 attacks, the CIA's pursuit of suspected terrorists led it down a dark path: the establishment of secret detention facilities known as black sites, and the use of torture. Driven by a belief that extreme measures were necessary to prevent another catastrophic attack, the Bush administration authorized the CIA to detain and interrogate high-value detainees outside the bounds of international law. These black sites, located in countries with questionable human rights records, became synonymous with brutality and abuse. Detainees were subjected to a horrifying array of torture methods, including waterboarding, sleep deprivation, and stress positions, often without access to legal counsel. The CIA justified these enhanced interrogation techniques by arguing they were necessary to extract vital intelligence. However, the use of torture proved to be both morally reprehensible and counterproductive. The Senate Intelligence Committee's 2014 report on CIA torture concluded that the program was poorly managed, far more brutal than acknowledged, and produced little valuable intelligence. The report also found that the CIA misled the White House, Congress, and the American public about the effectiveness of its interrogation program. The CIA's use of torture had severe consequences for U.S. moral authority and its standing in the world. The CIA's use of torture and extraordinary rendition drew widespread condemnation from human rights organizations, legal experts, and the international community. The United Nations declared torture a violation of international law, and the Geneva Conventions prohibit the torture or inhumane treatment of prisoners of war. Despite clear legal prohibitions, the Bush administration sought to justify the CIA's actions by arguing that detainees suspected of terrorism were not protected by the Geneva Conventions. This legal reasoning was widely disputed, and the administration's attempts to redefine torture were met with fierce opposition. In 2018, the European Court of Human Rights ruled that Romania and Lithuania had violated the European Convention on Human Rights by hosting secret CIA black sites. The legal and political fallout from the CIA's torture program continues with ongoing litigation, investigations, and calls for accountability. The CIA's long and controversial history of covert operations has had a profound impact on U.S. foreign policy and global human rights perspectives. The agency's actions, often shrouded in secrecy, have eroded trust in the United States government both at home and abroad. The CIA's interventions in Latin America and its support for death squads have left a legacy of mistrust and resentment. Beyond Latin America, the CIA's use of torture and black sites after 9/11 has tarnished America's image and made it more difficult to promote human rights. The hypocrisy of the United States condemning torture while engaging in it has not been lost on the international community. The CIA's actions have also had a corrosive effect on American democracy, undermining public trust in government and eroding principles of accountability and transparency. The CIA's history is a stark reminder that even the most powerful nations are not above the law. To restore its credibility, the CIA must be held accountable for its past abuses and commit to a more transparent and ethical future. Accountability begins with acknowledging the truth about the CIA's past actions. The United States government must declassify documents related to the CIA's covert operations. A full accounting of the past is essential for understanding the long-term consequences of the CIA's actions. In addition to transparency, justice for the victims of CIA abuses is crucial. The United States must provide redress to those who have been tortured, illegally detained, or forcibly disappeared. To prevent future abuses, the CIA must operate under a clear legal framework that prohibits torture and other violations of human rights. The Audubon ballroom buzzed to him, rushed forward, desperate to help, but it was clear that the wounds were grave. His lifeblood stained the floor, a stark contrast to the message of hope he embodied. The sight was heartbreaking. A man who had given so much, now silenced in the very place where he sought to uplift others. Malcolm X had risen from the streets to become a powerful voice for the disenfranchised. His journey from a troubled youth to a global icon was a testament to the power of self-education, resilience, and the relentless pursuit of justice. He challenged the status quo, demanding equality and justice for Black Americans. His speeches called out the hypocrisy of a nation that promised liberty but delivered oppression, and he inspired countless others to stand up and demand their rights. Beyond the public figure, Malcolm X was also a father, a husband, and a man who cared deeply for his community. His personal sacrifices were immense, and his family, like so many others, bore the weight of his activism. His assassination was a brutal silencing of a leader who dared to speak truth to power. The grief that followed was profound, not just for his family and friends, but for all who had looked to him for guidance and inspiration. The world mourned the loss of a revolutionary figure. Vigils were held across continents, and people of all backgrounds paused to reflect on the meaning of his life and the tragedy of his death. His words, once considered radical, resonated with newfound urgency. In the aftermath, his speeches and writings were revisited, studied, and cherished by a new generation determined to continue his fight. The assassination marked a turning point in the civil rights movement, fueling anger and distrust towards a system that seemed to tolerate violence against those who challenged it. Many activists, shocked and enraged, found renewed purpose in Malcolm X's legacy, vowing to push even harder for change. Questions swirled about who was responsible, and whether the full truth would ever come to light. Theories of conspiracy and government involvement only deepened the sense of injustice. And for many, Malcolm X's death became a symbol of the dangers faced by those who dared to speak out. The fight for equality had lost a power, seemed determined to tie the crime to the Nation of Islam, even as questions about motive and opportunity lingered. Within days, 3 men, Muhammad Abdul Aziz, Khalil Islam, and Thomas Hagen, were arrested and charged with the murder. Their arrests were widely publicized, and their faces appeared in newspapers and on television screens across the country. The authorities presented them as the masterminds behind the assassination, eager to show progress in the case. Hagen, also known as Talmadge X. Hayer, soon confessed to his involvement in the shooting. However, from the very beginning, he insisted that Aziz and Islam were innocent. Hagen's confession was detailed. He described his own role in the attack, but steadfastly maintained that the other 2 men had nothing to do with the plot. Hagen went further, claiming that 4 other men had participated in the assassination, none of whom were Aziz or Islam. He provided names and descriptions, hoping the authorities would investigate further. But his pleas fell on deaf ears. The police and prosecutors, under intense public scrutiny, seemed unwilling to reopen the case or consider alternative suspects. Despite Hagen's repeated insistence on their innocence, Aziz and Islam were convicted alongside him. The trial was swift, and the outcome seemed predetermined. The 3 men were paraded before the press, their guilt assumed by much of the public before the verdict was even read. The prosecution's case relied heavily on eyewitness testimony. Several witnesses claimed to have seen Aziz and Islam at the scene, but their accounts were inconsistent, and as later investigations would reveal, deeply flawed. Some witnesses recanted while others admitted to being pressured by police to identify the suspects. The defense team argued passionately that the investigation was rushed and biased, designed more to appease public outrage than to uncover the truth. They pointed to the lack of physical evidence linking Aziz and Islam to the crime, and the inconsistencies in the prosecution's case, but their arguments were largely ignored by a system eager for closure. The trial, shrouded in suspicion and allegations of misconduct, resulted in the convictions of all 3 men. The judge's verdict was delivered in a tense, packed courtroom, as reporters scribbled notes and cameras flashed. For many, the outcome felt less like justice and more like a foregone conclusion. Aziz and Islam were sentenced to life in prison, while Hagen received a reduced sentence for his confession and cooperation. For decades, Aziz and Islam would maintain their innocence from behind bars, their lives forever altered by a crime they insisted they did not commit. The swiftness of the investigation and the disregard for Hagen's claims of other accomplices fueled suspicions of a cover-up. Many in the community believed that the true story of Malcolm X's assassination had been buried, and that powerful interests had manipulated the investigation to protect themselves or to prevent deeper truths from coming to light. As the years passed, questions lingered about whether the real perpetrators had escaped justice. Activists, journalists, and historians would continue to probe the case, searching for answers and demanding accountability. The story of the initial investigation and convictions remains a powerful reminder of the complexities and failures of the justice system in one of America's most pivotal moments. For decades, Muhammad Aziz and Khalil Islam maintained their innocence from behind bars, steadfastly proclaiming that they had nothing to do with the assassination of Malcolm X. Despite the weight of their convictions and the years slipping by, both men refused to give up hope, holding on to the belief that the truth would one day come to light. Their claims, however, were largely ignored by the public and the courts. To many, they were simply the desperate pleas of convicted criminals, lost in the noise of a justice system that too often failed to listen. Appeals were dismissed, and headlines painted them as guilty men, their voices drowned out by the machinery of the state. However, beneath the surface, doubts about the case persisted. Inconsistencies in witness accounts, shifting testimonies, and a growing awareness of the FBI's aggressive surveillance and targeting of black activists during the civil rights era all fueled suspicion. The climate of the 1960s and 70s was one of deep mistrust between law enforcement and black communities, and the case against Aziz and Islam began to look increasingly questionable to those willing to dig deeper. In the 1970s, a significant development occurred. Talmadge Hagen, also known as Thomas Hagen, the only man who admitted to participating in the assassination, signed an affidavit. In this sworn statement, Hagen detailed the plot to kill Malcolm X, and crucially, reiterated that Aziz and Islam were not involved. He described the events of that fateful day and named the real co-conspirators, hoping to set the record straight. Hagen named the 4 other men he claimed were involved in the assassination, providing details that matched other evidence. Yet despite this new testimony and mounting questions about the original investigation, authorities remained unconvinced. The legal system seemed unwilling to revisit the case, and the new evidence was met with skepticism or outright dismissal. Aziz and Islam's appeals were repeatedly denied, their hopes dashed time and again. Each court appearance brought the possibility of justice, but the outcome was always the same: denial, disappointment, and more years lost to incarceration. The men and their families endured heartbreak after heartbreak, as the system refused to acknowledge the possibility of a grave mistake. The justice system, it seemed, was reluctant to admit its mistake. The fear of exposing institutional failures, combined with the racial prejudices of the era, created a wall of resistance that was nearly impossible to break through. For Aziz and Islam, the fight for exoneration became a battle not just for their own freedom, but for the integrity of the justice system itself. Decades passed, the world changed, but Aziz and Islam remained behind bars, growing older as the years slipped away. Their families aged, children grew up, and memories of life before prison faded. Yet the men never stopped fighting, and their supporters never stopped searching for the truth. It would take over 5 decades for the truth to finally emerge, a testament to their resilience and the persistence of those who believed in their innocence. In 2021, after a 2-year investigation by the Manhattan District Attorney's Office, the tide finally turned. Aziz and Islam were exonerated, their names cleared after more than half a century. The moment was both triumphant and bittersweet, a victory for justice, but a reminder of all that had been lost. The reinvestigation uncovered a trove of previously suppressed evidence, including FBI documents that had never been shared with the defense. These files corroborated Hagen's claims and pointed to the potential involvement of other suspects, revealing a pattern of misconduct and cover-up that had kept the truth hidden for decades. The legal team pored over thousands of pages, piecing together a story that had been buried by time and bureaucracy. The newly revealed documents showed that key evidence had been withheld, witnesses had been pressured, and the original investigation was deeply flawed. The case against Aziz and Islam unraveled, exposing the extent to which the justice system had failed them. Legal experts, activists, and the public demanded answers. How could such a miscarriage of justice have happened? What other cases might have suffered similar fates? The story dominated headlines, sparking debates about wrongful convictions and the urgent need for reform. The case exposed the flaws in the initial investigation, highlighting the dangers of rushed prosecutions, coerced testimonies, and the suppression of exculpatory evidence. It became a cautionary tale about the consequences of systemic bias and the importance of transparency in the pursuit of justice. The assassination of President John F. Kennedy on November 22, 1963, sent shockwaves across the globe. It was a moment that left an indelible mark on the collective consciousness of the world. A young, charismatic leader was taken too soon, his presidency cut tragically short. His vision for a brighter future was abruptly halted, leaving a void in the hearts of many. The official investigation, led by the Warren Commission, concluded that Lee Harvey Oswald acted alone in killing JFK. However, doubts lingered. Many questioned the thoroughness and transparency of the investigation. Conspiracy theories flourished, fueled by inconsistencies and unanswered questions. Theories ranged from involvement by the CIA to the Mafia, each adding layers of intrigue and suspicion. For decades, the assassination has captivated historians, researchers, and armchair detectives alike. Each new piece of evidence or theory reignites the debate and keeps the mystery alive. The possibility of a cover-up, of hidden truths, has kept the case alive in the public imagination. People continue to seek answers, hoping to uncover what really happened. The quest for answers has been a long and winding road marked by speculation, controversy, and fierce debate. Each new revelation brings both clarity and confusion. Now, with the recent release of thousands of previously classified documents, we have a chance to re-examine the evidence and confront the shadows of that fateful day in Dallas. These documents could hold the key to understanding the full scope of the events. The release of these files, mandated by a 1992 Act of Congress, marks a pivotal moment in our understanding of this pivotal event. It represents a significant step towards transparency and truth. While many of the documents have been available to the public for years, they were heavily redacted, concealing crucial details. The new releases promise more transparency. The newly released files promise to shed light on long-standing mysteries surrounding the assassination, offering a glimpse into the inner workings of the investigation and the events leading up to that tragic day. They may finally provide the answers that have eluded us for so long. The timing of this release, coming at a time of heightened political polarization and widespread distrust in institutions, only amplifies its significance. It underscores the need for transparency and accountability in our government. As we delve into these documents, we must do so with a critical eye, separating fact from fiction, evidence from speculation. It is a delicate task that requires diligence and discernment. The assassination of John F. Kennedy remains a defining moment in American history, a wound that has yet to fully heal. It is a chapter that continues to evoke strong emotions and reflections. The search for truth and justice continues. As new information comes to light, the hope remains that one day, the full story will be revealed. The assassination unfolded on a bright, sunny afternoon as President Kennedy's motorcade made its way through Dealey Plaza in Dallas, Texas. Crowds lined the streets, eager to catch a glimpse of their young president. At approximately 12:30 p.m., shots rang out, piercing the air and forever altering the course of history. The world watched in horror as news of the shooting spread, followed by the devastating confirmation that President Kennedy had succumbed to his injuries. The immediate aftermath was a blur of confusion and chaos. Law enforcement scrambled to secure the area, witnesses offered conflicting accounts, and the nation grappled with the unthinkable. Lee Harvey Oswald, a former Marine with ties to the Soviet Union, was arrested within hours of the shooting. He maintained his innocence, claiming he was a patsy, but his words were drowned out by the overwhelming evidence against him. The Warren Commission, established by President Lyndon B. Johnson to investigate the assassination, concluded that Oswald acted alone, firing 3 shots from the Texas School Book Depository building. Their findings, while comprehensive, did little to quell the doubts that lingered in the minds of many Americans. Conspiracy theories quickly took root, fueled by inconsistencies in the official narrative, questions about Oswald's motives and capabilities, and the mysterious death of Oswald himself at the hands of Jack Ruby, a Dallas nightclub owner. The seeds of suspicion, once sown, proved difficult to eradicate, taking hold in the fertile ground of national trauma and uncertainty. The March 2025 release of over 63,000 pages of JFK assassination-related records marks a significant development in the ongoing quest for answers. This monumental release has reignited public interest and scholarly debate as people from all walks of life seek to uncover the truth behind one of the most infamous events in American history. This treasure trove of information, comprising approximately 2,200 files, many without prior redactions, adds to the existing 6 million-plus pages already accessible to the public. The sheer volume of these documents is staggering, offering a wealth of new data for researchers to sift through and analyze. These documents, held under lock and key for decades, offer a tantalizing glimpse into the inner workings of the investigation and the events surrounding the assassination. They provide a rare opportunity to peer behind the curtain of government secrecy and explore the complexities of this historical mystery. Among the most intriguing revelations is a 1991 CIA memo that casts doubt on Lee Harvey Oswald's abilities as a marksman. This memo challenges long-held assumptions and opens the door to new interpretations of the evidence. The memo, based on KGB files on Oswald, states that the Soviet Union did not believe Oswald was capable of carrying out such a sophisticated assassination. This revelation adds a new layer of complexity to the narrative, suggesting that there may have been other forces at play. This assessment, if accurate, raises serious questions about Oswald's role in the assassination and the possibility of other individuals or groups being involved. It invites us to reconsider the official story and explore alternative theories. The release also sheds light on Oswald's activities in the months leading up to the assassination, including his visits to the Soviet and Cuban embassies in Mexico City. These visits have long been a focal point for researchers, and the new documents provide additional context. These visits, while never fully explained, have long been a source of speculation and intrigue for assassination researchers. The new information may help to clarify Oswald's intentions and connections during this critical period. The newly released documents provide greater context for these visits, revealing the extent of Oswald's contacts with foreign governments and potentially offering clues about his motivations. This deeper understanding could reshape our perception of the events leading up to the assassination. Despite the wealth of information contained in the newly released files, many questions remain unanswered. The frustration of historians and researchers is palpable as they continue to seek clarity. Thousands of documents remain unreleased or heavily redacted, their contents still shrouded in secrecy. This ongoing secrecy fuels further speculation and demands for transparency. The Biden administration argues that the release of these remaining documents could jeopardize national security and ongoing intelligence operations. This stance has sparked a heated debate about the balance between transparency and security. However, critics contend that the government is using national security as a pretext for concealing embarrassing or incriminating information. They argue that the public has a right to know the full truth. The debate over the remaining classified documents is likely to continue for years to come, fueling further speculation and debate about the assassination. As new information emerges, the quest for truth will persist, keeping the mystery of JFK's assassination alive in the public consciousness. Lee Harvey Oswald remains the most enigmatic figure in the JFK assassination saga. Was he the lone gunman driven by twisted motives, as the Warren Commission concluded? Or was he a pawn in a larger conspiracy, manipulated by forces beyond his control? Oswald's background is a study in contradiction and complexity. A former Marine with a history of erratic behavior, he defected to the Soviet Union in 1959, only to return to the United States with his Russian wife and young child in 1962. His movements in the months leading up to the assassination were equally perplexing, marked by contacts with pro-Castro and anti-Castro groups, as well as the Soviet and Cuban embassies in Mexico City. The newly released CIA memo, which casts doubt on Oswald's marksmanship abilities, further complicates the picture. If Oswald was not a skilled shooter, as the KGB believed, could he have accurately fired the shots that killed Kennedy? The memo suggests that Oswald may have been a less than ideal candidate for a lone gunman, potentially pointing to the involvement of other individuals with greater skills and experience. Adding to the enigma is Oswald's own insistence that he was just a patsy, a claim he made repeatedly after his arrest. These words, uttered in the chaotic aftermath of the assassination, have resonated through the decades, fueling speculation about a wider conspiracy. Was Oswald a knowing participant in a larger plot, or was he, as he claimed, an unwitting pawn in a deadly game? The newly released files, while providing valuable insights into Oswald's life and activities, ultimately fail to provide a definitive answer to this enduring question. The mystery of Lee Harvey Oswald's true role in the assassination of President Kennedy continues to captivate and perplex historians, researchers, and the general public alike. Each new piece of evidence seems to raise more questions than it answers, ensuring that the debate over whether Oswald was a lone wolf or a pawn in a larger conspiracy will persist for years to come. It's important to understand the geopolitical climate of the time, the Cold War tensions, and the intricate spy networks that operated in the shadows. We'll explore the theories, the evidence, and the key players who might have had a hand in this global conspiracy. So, let's unravel the mystery and see what the files reveal about the KGB's possible involvement. In the tangled web of the JFK files, the Cuban connection stands out. How did the events in Cuba ripple through the corridors of power in Washington? The answers remain elusive, but the questions are compelling. John F. Kennedy was more than just a name in the headlines. His legacy, his dreams, and his untimely death continue to resonate. What drove the man behind the presidential seal? And why does his story still captivate us? Even after all these years, the JFK files leave us with unanswered questions and unfinished business. Theories abound, but concrete answers are in short supply. What really happened on that fateful day in Dallas? Quest for truth continues, driven by the relentless curiosity of historians, researchers, and everyday citizens. The JFK files are more than just documents. They are pieces of a puzzle that many are still trying to solve. Will we ever uncover the full story? Only time will tell.